Why do we get irritated at someone speeding past us on the highway, even though we may drive well over the limit all the time? Why do we get angry when we hear someone cheated on their taxes, even though we may claim all sorts of personal meals and purchases as business expenses? Why do we get all bent out of shape when other children get more playing time than ours in some school or public sport, even though we'd be thrilled and remain silent if the situation were reversed? Why do we get angry when we hear about people overusing healthcare services which drive up the cost of premiums, even though we run to the doctor for every sniffle, every rash, and every ache? Why do we get furious when we hear about some judge being lenient when sentencing someone convicted of a crime, even though if we were in some kind of legal trouble, we would want the whole thing dismissed? Why do we get insulted when people make extremely low offers on a house we're selling, even though we have no intention of buying our next house at anywhere near the asking price? And why do we encourage our friends to leave their cheating spouses, even though when we were unfaithful or did serious damage to our marriage in some other way, we begged our spouse to take us back in? Put simply, why do we want things for ourselves that we don't really want for others? Now, nowhere does this seem to be more evident than in regards to forgiveness. We all want to be forgiven. We all want second chances and third and fourth and fifth and sometimes even 1,000 times to be forgiven for the same old sin. We all want others to understand us and be compassionate towards us and show us mercy. We all want people to say, life happens, things happen, and move on when we have messed up. We all want people to let us hit the reset button so that we can turn back the clock of time as if nothing happened. I guess you could say that we all want people to treat us as we believe God treats us. Why do we find it so hard then to do the same? We just heard one of the most beautiful stories in sacred scripture, a dramatic tale of pride and anger and shame and sorrow and mercy and forgiveness and joy. This story has a little bit of everything. One person in the story comes to the realization that he has wronged another and he needs forgiveness. One person gives that forgiveness freely and without condition. And one person struggles to forgive. Who are we in that story? I see myself clearly in two of the characters for sure. In the brother who does a stupid, hurtful thing, wandering away from those who love him most and convinced that he'd be better off going it alone. And in the brother who feels like he's been cheated in some way, feels that his brother is getting a better deal than he deserves, feels that the whole situation is completely unfair. But am I ever the father apart from the sacrament of reconciliation? Am I ever the one doing the actual forgiving? Maybe we only think that's God's work. It's God's job. It's God's responsibility to forgive. Maybe we're really not that interested in trying to live our lives then in imitation of Him. Put another way, maybe we simply want all the blessings, but then have no intentions of being a blessing. As you well know, one of our responsibilities during this holy season of Lent is to examine our own faith lives, to take an honest look at the ways we have strayed, stumbled, and sinned. It's a time to look deeply at our motives and our actions in order to see what needs to be changed in us. In many ways, these 40 days are about recognizing ourselves as that brother who has packed up and walked away from God in small things and in great ones, in tiny acts of selfishness and disobedience, and in grave acts that have caused much harm. Lent is very much about coming to the realization just how deeply and how dependent we are upon God to guide us, to forgive us, to console us, and ultimately to save us. Yet, one of the greatest truths of faith, and a difficult one to grasp at times, is that the thing we want and need most desperately from God, love, mercy, generosity, compassion, forgiveness, are only experienced in their fullest sense when we ourselves demonstrate to others and live out those very same qualities. When we love, we experience love. When we are generous, we receive. When we are merciful to others, we are shown mercy. And when we forgive others, we experience the profound, life-changing forgiveness of God, our God who came to us in the person of Jesus, who died not only to reconcile the world to himself, but to reconcile ourselves to one another, to bring about real healing and communion within the human family. It's that last piece that we often forget. And so this Lent, as we recognize ourselves in the prodigal son, may we also make sure that we're not living our lives as the older son at the same time. That is, to make sure that we're not withholding forgiveness from those who desperately need it from us. If we can do that, admit that we indeed are the brother who has wandered off, while at the same time refusing to be the older brother, the one who struggles to forgive, we can be sure that we are on the way, on the right path towards being more like the Father. Who do I need to forgive right now, at this very second? Who is it that you need to forgive right now, at this very moment? My friends, we could not be in a better position as we examine ourselves, as we sit before the throne of God in the very courts of heaven, asking God's mercy for ourselves, but likewise giving us the grace to extend that same mercy to those who have wronged us. And as we live our life then according to this great teaching, we will be glorifying God by our lives.